This video is brought to you by Miniature Market. Thousands of board games, discounted prices, miniaturemarket.com.
Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today, we're gonna delve into a beautiful, submersive world in an alternative history of the 1920s in Eastern Europa. We're gonna be moving our workers around and gathering resources. We're gonna be building up mechs and having those mechs carry our workers across water. We're gonna be having some characters going to the factory, giving us many more options. In this beautiful world, today we're talking about Scythe. This is a 1 to 5 player game designed by Jamey Stegmaier and published by Stonemaier games. I'm going to highlight actually these components, the minis and things like that. I'm also going to show you at a high level how the game is played, and then I'll see you on the other side for my final thoughts. First, I want to showcase off some of the components inside. Here are some of the characters that you'll have depending on which faction that you're a part of. And not only do you have those nice miniatures for the characters, you also have 4 mechs for each of the factions. Now inside, each player is going to get their very own faction mat, and the artwork in the world that is produced in this is amazing. This essentially is an alternate history in 1920s Eastern Europa. Each one will have different abilities that you'll be able to unlock some of these throughout, but I want you to focus mainly on the artwork right now. Here's 2 more faction mats to check out the beautiful art. And the last one. Now the object inside is to have the most money at the end of the game, because essentially money is points, and the money are these nice cardboard tokens here. Now here we have the game set up actually for 4 different players or factions, and this is sort of the board and how it starts, but we're going to mostly focus right now on this left side up here, which is going to talk about the main goals of the game. Now there's 3 main ways that you're going to be trying to score that money throughout the game. One is to be gathering stars, which we'll talk about in just a moment. The second is to be controlling areas at the end of the game, and the third is to be having some extra resources at the end of the game. Now how much these are worth are going to differ depending on how popular you are. This is a popularity track. Everyone starts at a specific level depending on the boards that they're given to at the beginning of the game, and this will rise and fall, and the higher you are, the more each of these pay out at the end of the game. So this is sort of a big sliding scale. Now these stars that we talked about that will give you a certain amount of points, those will be given to you as you complete different objectives throughout the game up here. For example, if your popularity got all the way up to 18, you'd be able to place a star. And so for the popularity track, the red player will be able to place a star here. This also acts as a counter for the game, or a timer, because once a player has gotten 6 stars, the game ends pretty much immediately. So what other objectives are you going for? Well, you're going for power. And much like popularity, power is divvied up differently depending on the starting board you started with. And again, if you get your power marker all the way up to here, you could put a star there. This generally otherwise is going to help you out in combat, which we'll go over later. Another thing you might be focusing on is winning combat. You can place up to 2 stars for winning up to 2 combat. We'll go over that later. You can also try to complete one of your special objectives. So each player is secretly given 2 of these at the beginning of the game, and most of the time you can only do 1 of these, like having at least $20 at the end of your turn, or controlling 3 forest territories at the end of your turn. When you complete one of these, that's when you can put 1 of those stars. You might be trying to have 8 workers and get a star there. Now each faction starts with 2 workers out, but you'll need to get 6 more out to get to that 8 throughout the game for that goal. Now the last 4 possible goals are things that you can accomplish on your player mat, which we'll talk about as I get a little bit deeper into the game. But essentially, again, you're trying to get stars for points, and whoever does 6, that will end the game. Now I showed you the faction mechs at the beginning, but they were empty. They were covering up certain abilities. That's because your mechs are here, and as you're able to put these out, you'll be unlocking abilities. And of course, every faction has an ability they can use throughout the game. Now each player will also get a player mat, which after setup looks something like this for the red player, but there's many of these mats, like this one is agricultural, this one's mechanic, and these will change what you do throughout the game too. Now they all have the same actions, but they're in sort of different spots. Now on the bottom side, we see we can upgrade, deploy a mech, we can build a structure, or we can enlist, and those are in the same order always, left to right, but what you need for that changes. Like this one you need to pay 2 oil to upgrade, this one you need 3. This one you need 3 metal for mechs, this one's 4. So these are all slightly different even though they're in the same order, but the top actions of each spot are definitely different. Like this one, we have move, then trade, then produce, then bolster. This one goes trade, bolster, use, produce. So they're all sort of intermingled, so different combinations of player mat and where you're starting your faction will change the game every time. Now on your turn, you'll be able to place your pawn on a specific spot and then do the top and or bottom action that's there. For example, I can move. So in this case, I can move 2 different people, 1, or I could just take a coin, which essentially is points. Now here's that red faction, and this is where you start off with 2 workers, and when you move, you can move them any one hex that's close to it. But notice there's rivers here. By default, most factions cannot move through the rivers or through these lakes without having special abilities that allow them to do so. But you can also move these big characters as well, and move different workers and things like that as you move through the different territories. On a subsequent turn, you would have to move this to a different spot. Of course, the red faction's actual special abilities, they can stay on the same spot, but most people will have to go to a different spot. And this is we could produce. We could produce on 2 different hexes. So let's look at that. Now, depending on where we're at, producing is only done by the wooden workers. Here I'm going to produce 1 oil for each worker here. Here I'm going to produce another worker for every worker. And here, if I had someone here, it would be oil, but I'm doing 2 of these. And as you can see, here are the different resources that are in the game. We do have the iron there, the food, the oil, and the wood. So as you can see, I did place an oil here because it produced 1, and we put a worker because it produced 1. Resources you'll be able to use from the board, assuming you can still control those areas. Now, interesting thing about adding workers is as the game goes on, you add more, you'll have to pay certain things like bolster, which is that power, and even popularity, and even money. The more and more workers you put out, you have to pay more and more each time you produce. An interesting aspect of the game. Also, let's talk about paying. Sometimes you have to pay to take an action. So if you go here, you have to pay a coin. You can take any 2 resources of your choice and place them on places that you control, or get 1 popularity. And bolstering, you'd need to pay. You'd get 2 of those powers that we showed you earlier, or a combat card. Now, people start with a different amount of these. That will help you through combat. We'll go over that later. But those are sort of all the top actions. Now, for these bottom actions, remember, when you go to a spot, if I did this and I was able to trade, and I now had, in this case, 4 metal, I could actually spend that to then deploy a mech. And you get to decide which one you want to deploy, and they each unlock a different ability. So you have to look under these and say, ooh, this is Riverwalk. This allows my mech to walk through rivers, to food places, and to villages. But hey, speed allows my mech and or my big character to move +1 hex whenever they move. So all these have different abilities, and the different factions do different things. But you can unlock that, put the mech where a worker is, and go to the next player. So let's say I had placed this mech here. This would be kind of interesting because the mech now has a Riverwalk, and this Riverwalk allows me to go to village. And the cool thing about mechs is they can carry workers. So when this mech moved, it could move across here at the Riverwalk and carry workers with them. That'll allow them to get to different spots. Speaking of different spots, now that you're on this tunnel, you could actually move from here to any of these other tunnels for 1 adjacent move. And continuing to talk about movement, if we move this character here, anytime a character comes up to one of these encounter tokens, you get an encounter card and you get drawn into this world. Again, a beautiful artwork, and you look at what's going on, and you could either, hey, shoot a wild boar for lunch of bacon, and you'd gain 2 food and 1 popularity. Or you could herd the boars away from the town and pay $2 to gain any 3 resources. Or you could steer the boars into the helpless village, and people wouldn't like that, so you'd pay 2 popularity to gain 1 worker and 3 wood. So very thematic ways to be drawn closer into this world. Let's talk about some of these other bottom actions. Upgrading allows you to pay a certain amount of oil depending on your board, and take any one of these cubes that are sort of blocking these. You get to unlock any one of these that you want, and then you get to place this on another spot that has places that you can place the cubes. So now that's reducing the cost and unlocking something. So now when I move, I could actually move 3 different units 1 spot, and when I deploy mechs, it only costs me 3. So you're changing your engine when you upgrade. If you went here and spent the 4 wood to build, you'd get, in this case, 2 coins, and you could build. If you build the mine, you place this out, and this acts as those tunnels I just showed about, where the spot where this is adjacent to all those other tunnels. You could make the armory, which is anytime you do this action, you'd also gain another bolster. You could do this action, which would get you the mill, and you place this out, essentially gives you an extra production for where that is. And you can get the monument, which every time you take this action, you'll also gain a popularity, so that's building. And then finally, you can enlist. In this case, you'd pay 3 food, you'd get 3 coins, you get to enlist. By doing that, you take any one of these and you unlock it. So now when you do this bottom action, you'd get, in addition to this, you'd get a popularity. And all these have different things, like this one gets you a coin, this one gets you more bolster, this one gets you another combat card. With that cylinder that you just unlocked, you get to enlist here and either get 2 combat cards, 2 popularity, 2 coins, or 2 bolster, and you get that immediately. So typically your workers are producing, your mechs can do combat, but they can also bring your workers around. The characters can also get into combat, but they can also go to encounters. And if they're able to get to the factory, which is really cool, you get these factory cards. Now there'd actually be, well, 1 more than the number of players is how many cards there'd be there. The first person gets to choose that gets there. And these are just very powerful actions that you get to add to the side of your playmat. And now this is a valid action that you can now do. Now we talked about how controlling territories is worth a certain amount of points at the end of the game. Well, the factory is worth 3 territories, so it's always contested pretty heavily throughout the game. Now let's briefly talk about combat. Anytime there's a territory that has different factions on it with mechs and or characters, a combat will happen. The attacker will take this wheel, the defender will take this wheel, and they can spend up to 7, because that's what the wheel has, 0 to 7, up to 7 of their power, but for each of the mechs slash characters they have, they can secretly add a specific combat card, but this is all done secretly. So a lot of it's trying to decide how much are they gonna do they think I'm really gonna win? If this person was way up here and they were fighting, is this player just gonna retreat and not really do a whole lot? Knowing that this player is very powerful, or are they going to hope that this player spends a lot of energy and power so that they can kind of get him again next time? And essentially, they would, when they're ready, they would flip it over, they would add the number here, plus any numbers here, and whoever wins would keep theirs in the territory, and the other player just essentially would bring their units back to their home faction, and if they used at least 1 here, they'd actually get 1 of these cards as compensation, but that's how basic combat is. And there's 1 other randomized goal each game. This says however many structures you have adjacent to some of these encounter spots, and depending on how many you have, you'll get a certain amount of points at the end. But again, you're going till someone has 6 stars out there. Then you're going to be counting up all your money by the money you have in your hands, plus the different money from the 3 main ways of scoring with your popularity there, telling you how much you get, as I mentioned previously. Now earlier we talked about these 4 different places that you could actually complete goals. And those are completed by completely upgrading all 6 of your cubes, or deploying all 4 of your mechs, building all 4 of your structures, and enlisting in all 4 spots. There is a way to play the game solo. It's called using the automa system, where during the first part of the game, it'll be doing certain things, and then during the second part of the game, it'll be doing things that are a little bit harder to deal with. I'm not going to go over it in much more detail. There's rules out there you can look at, but it's a whole deck of cards that allows you to play solo. Now this is that normal side of the board that I showed you. It works absolutely fine. However, you can buy an extension to this board, which I just recently bought, and we'll show you what it does. So here's the main board just flipped over. Now it's elongated, but everything is also at a grander scale, and that's why I obviously can't fit the whole board. That's where the extension board comes in, and it comes here, you just slide it, so now you just have a humongous board, but it's the full board, a lot bigger. All right, well, there's Scythe. Now, this game has an amazingly spectacular world that you're playing and living in. You know, this got my art of the year when it came out in 2016, and I still love the art. There's actually an art book you can buy that's separate from the game to look through all the art. I just think it's so gorgeous, it really draws me in. The game has fantastic production. The components, the boards, the minis, everything here, even on the boards, those little indentations that you place the upgrade cubes and all the different buildings, very well done, because I mean, it could have easily just been a play mat. People would have been, you know, maybe hitting the cubes, knocking them over, moving things around, but they really made sure that this game not only looked well, but played well and felt well. So big thumbs up. The production, the minis look awesome. I highlighted to you what those look like, you know, and the mechs and the wooden components, everything here is top notch for sure. Now, in short, I think this is an absolute design masterpiece. I also think it's going to be a game that we're going to be talking about 10, maybe even 20 years from now. We're going to look back. This is going to be sort of a milestone in gaming that, yes, it did get a lot of hype, but I think warrantedly so that the game is absolutely awesome. There's so many great design choices. So let's go into some of these design choices that I love so much. The asymmetry for the factions and player mats. Love that. Not only do you get your own ability, but you have all these different mech abilities that you're unlocking, and each of those sort of feel different for each faction. And then you've got that randomized, player mat, which also is different. And each of those kind of combo differently depending on your faction, because each faction starts with workers out in 2 spots. And sometimes every game your engine's going to feel different, because sometimes you might be able to have a, produce, or you can make resources, you can buy the resources in something that you're already in, and you can kind of like engine that out really quick at the beginning. But then sometimes it's not going to be as easy, and you're going to have to think a different way. And I like that, because every game I've played of this, it really does feel different. You cannot just play the same old strategy every game and win. You could try to do that, but it's much more exciting to try to give what the board and what the mats give, take what they give you and kind of go different strategies based upon that, and then based upon what the opponents are doing. I love that. The engine building in this game, it's really mostly an engine building game. Sure, there's territory control, there's a little bit of combat, but really it's about that engine, and I love it. That, again, trying to figure out my engine for this game with my faction, with my board, with what's going on, and it changes, and I love getting it going and getting it humming. It's so fun. The bottom row actions. I love being able to combo those. You're thinking ahead. You're trying to be able to go, you know what, I'm going to go here, I'm going to do this top action, then I'm going to do this bottom action. And I love being able to try to, every time you do that, you're taking basically an additional turn on your turn, and doing that multiple times or doing it more than others throughout the game is probably going to help you get close to winning. And I think that's really clever that you're trying to figure that out as to how to combo these together. And again, it goes back to those player maps where certain things are lined up differently, top and bottom actions, and then even how many resources you need are going to be different on the bottom row. So love the way that, again, replayability, but the comboing with that bottom row action, and that the bottom row typically is like simultaneous. So there's a lot going on in the game, and hey, I do this, now I'm doing this bottom row action, and as I'm trying to figure this out, the next player can go, and I love that. It keeps the game moving. I love that combat is streamlined. I'm not a big fan of combat, which I think when I first heard about this, I saw this big 4X game, I saw all these miniatures, dudes on the map, and I think before I even played it the first time, I was like, this doesn't look like it's going to be my style of game, because I don't like a lot of that combat, but it's very streamlined. It's more about the threat of being able to have combat than actually having combat. Sure, there'll be a couple of battles maybe each game. It might change depending on your play style, but it's so quick and easy and streamlined. I love that aspect of it. I feel like this game is like 85% Euro, 15% percent Amerithrash, and I think that's perfect for my tastes. I love that you're really trying to just home in and focus on those 6 goals. There's many possible goals, and you might actually have 4 of them done, and you're looking at the last 2, and maybe at the end you kind of turn and do something different based upon what's happening, but you're really trying to focus throughout the game as to how you're going to get there, because again, the quicker you get there, usually the better off you are, which brings me to the last one, which was the game can end with you having most stars but not winning. If you just rush to the end and you haven't really spread out much, you might not win. That happened to me somewhat recently, where I was the one to get the 6 star, but I still lost by 2 points because I didn't quite spread out enough to get those different points. I love all that different things here. Anything I don't like about this? Not really. I absolutely love this game. It's one that people ask, why haven't you reviewed this? Why haven't you reviewed this? Now, I played it when it first came out in 2016, and I thought it was good. I liked it, but it had been a while since I played it, and then recently I started playing it more and more and more. Over Christmas holidays, I played it like 5 or 6 times. And I just absolutely love this game. And because the new expansion's coming out, Fenris is Rising. I did a video about that. I'll try to put the link in the description of this video about this new campaign and module-based expansion coming out. So there's a lot of new people excited about this game. It's kind of people that have played it a ton are now getting excited. So I thought it'd be a good time to drop this review and telling you what I really think of the game. But nothing I can really think. The only thing, and this is just a personal preference, I would have loved to see, or maybe someday, a pre-painted option where you can buy the game for more money, but then it's sort of, the minis are pre-painted, because I've been kind of thinking about getting them painted because I just love this game so much. I'm going to stop gushing. Love the game. Absolutely getting a saxophone serenade. I can't say much more. Fantastic. Did it live up to the hype? I don't know if any game could quite live up to that hype, but I gotta say it's pretty darn close because the game is amazing. That's Scythe.
This video was sponsored by Miniature Market's Review Corner. The Review Corner features podcasts, video, and written game reviews by gamers for gamers. Miniature Market, the online gaming superstore. Thousands of board games, discounted prices. Check them out at miniaturemarket.com.